This episode of Lines of Enquiry is supported by Shopify. Many people carry the same thought for years, a business idea, a product they believe in, something they'd like to build themselves. But very often, the doubts arrive just as quickly. What if I don't have the technical skills? What if I don't know how to build a website? What if I can't manage everything on my own? Those questions stop a lot of ideas before they ever begin. That's where Shopify comes in. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names to brands just getting started. If you're worried about building a website, Shopify provides modern, professional, ready-to-use templates that help you create the perfect online shop from day one. If you need help with everyday tasks, Shopify's AI tools can assist with product descriptions, improving product images, and generating promotional offers. And when it comes to finding customers, Shopify helps you reach them through simple email and social media marketing campaigns. If you ever need support, Shopify also offers award-winning customer service, available 24 hours a day. So those what-ifs don't have to stop you. They can become the beginning of something. Sign up for your €1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.ie. Go to shopify.ie. This podcast is supported by advertisement from Shopify that allows us to create new episodes for you every week. Their support helps us to tell important stories. I would appreciate it if you could support the businesses who support this podcast. See what you can accomplish with Shopify by your side. Shopify.ie.
GoLoud.
My name is John Sweetman, and this is Lines of Enquiry Case Notes. In Case Notes, we step away from telling one specific case in detail and instead take some time to reflect, to revisit past investigations, and to respond directly to you, the listener. These episodes are about opening up the conversation. We'll be speaking with expert guest contributors, diving a little deeper into the issues behind the stories, and responding to some of the much valued correspondence that comes into our mailbox. If you have a message you'd like to share, a case you'd like us to revisit, or someone you'd like to hear from on future episodes of Case Notes, you can get in touch with us at linesofenquiry@goloudnow.com. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at Lines of Enquiry Podcast to keep up to date. In today's episode of Case Notes, I'm joined by retired Detective Superintendent Frank Keenaghan. Frank served with An Garda Síochána for 40 years, working on major investigations across the country and eventually becoming a senior investigating officer. In May 2018, he led the frantic search for 24-year-old student Jastine Valdez after she was abducted near her home in Enniskerry, County Wicklow. A case that horrified the nation and ended in a 24-hour manhunt for her killer, Mark Hennessy. Today we're going to talk about Frank's life in policing, his experience leading that race against time to find Jastine, and the impact cases like that leave behind. Frank, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. So, I suppose 40 years in the Guards, you had 10 more than me. Could you kind of bring us through your career, just in a nutshell, really?
Yeah, I started off
broadly.
in Dundrum, and I was in Dundrum as a uniformed guard, working regular relief out on patrols and out on beats, mixing with the community, getting involved with whatever youth centres and all the rest that were on Ballantyre and Sandyford, and just generally learning the ropes. While I was in Dundrum, a vacancy came up in Cabinteely, and that was closer to where I lived. So I put in for a transfer over to Cabinteely, and that was granted. And very quickly I became a patrol car driver. And I suppose I gravitated towards crime, and from that I was taken into a crime task force where I probably, if you were to ask my wife, she would say that was probably the best time you ever had in the Guards, because we were out chasing the bad guys, flying around.
Task force.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving on, as we touched in the introduction, one of the most high-profile cases you've been involved in was the abduction and murder of Jastine Valdez, a terribly shocking and sad story that we've covered on Lines of Enquiry. Can you remember, like, the call coming in about that, the immediate reaction to it, like?
Yeah, I can remember coming in early that morning for work, and the commotion that was going on, trying to catch up with where the Garda inquiries had led us to, and obviously to take charge of the investigation, to put a structure on it, to get the Garda processes up and running.
And that would have been the Sunday morning, wasn't it?
That would have been early Sunday morning, yeah.
And she had been reported missing the night before. That 24 hours between that Sunday and the following day must have been very, very high pressure stuff,
I suppose, I was fortunate enough to do the Senior Investigating Officer course, both in Templemore, the Garda College, and in Tullyallen, the Scottish Police College. And with the Scottish Police College course, we were fortunate to have a number of speakers from the London Met, and we had some of the officers that were on the Madeleine McCann investigation lecture to us while we were there, and they were talking about the sliding scale, the way it diminishes, after 4 hours, after 8 hours, after 12 hours. So if somebody is missing for 8 hours, there's still a realistic chance that you get them back. But if they're gone for 16 hours and 24 hours, we're breaking it down like that suddenly the scale is sliding, and it's a kind of a sliding scale of diminishing returns.
And you obviously in the Jastine investigation, you were conscious of that.
That's one thing that stuck with me. You see, nobody has a kind of like in the movies, an underground bunker where they take them off and they're self-sustaining and all the rest, and they can live down there for a year or 2 years or whatever. To my mind, time is of the essence, and within 8 hours, within 16 hours, and then you're not fooling yourself any longer. I would have been acutely aware and conscious of that fact.
That fact, as well as the fact that you're in charge of a large amount of gardaí tasked with this, trying to find this poor girl. So what would have been the first decisions you would have made that morning?
Well, the first decision would be to review all of the CCTV, all of the leads, anything that we got in on appeals from the public, whatever. Because I remember on another murder investigation where a pair of runners were found in the back garden that turned out to be very significant altogether. So you just can't, you have to have an open mind. Every single detail. Everything.
And when you mentioned the CCTV, was it difficult to obtain that, or was that? I suppose
An Garda Síochána always have a wonderful working relationship with our colleagues in Dublin Bus.
Yeah.
And, we laughed at it now, but two of them were woken up in their sleep very early in the morning and obliged and came into the depot and burned off the CCTV for us. So that anything we asked for, we were up and running.
Yeah. And that was very important, because the CCTV captured her on the bus with the suspect vehicle behind it, which went some ways into identifying the vehicle. And then, like, one of your biggest decisions was to release the make and registration number of the car. Did you have any, were you anyway reticent about doing that, or, balancing operational security with the need of the public's help? Could you just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, it's generally something that we don't do.
Yeah.
But you can see now at the time, the hours were ticking by. And, for operational reasons, we don't normally do that. We don't normally release those details. But at this stage, I felt I had nothing to lose. Yeah. And even when I was just, I won't say questioned, but probed by my senior officers, why would you do that? We don't normally do that. I was in a position to say, look, we really are losing time here. We really need as much help as we can get. And I felt that this was this is a right call to make.
Oh,
this was to get that registration out there. And it turns out that that's exactly, how we located the car.
Yeah, because it was a member of the public who obviously had seen or heard the appeal about the suspect vehicle, who recognised it and called it in.
That's correct, yeah.
I remember myself that weekend, and I was very impressed with how quick the investigation was moving on, that they had the suspect vehicle and they were giving out this information. Like, it seemed to me, I got the impression anyway, that nothing was being left to chance. Everything was being geared towards finding Jastine. So,
well, everything that we were doing there were members of the public out there who were listening to the news, who were watching this on social media and all the rest, and they were dying to do as much as they possibly could to help out here, because here was a lovely 24-year-old missing, and now all this information was coming out, and then we released the registration of the car, so we were going in a definite direction with it, and the public could see that, and they were just so anxious to help, and why not harness that goodwill?
Yeah, it's great that the public were that much behind the investigation. And I would imagine that you would have got loads of leads or loads of tips or information in from the public. And, was it difficult in filtering out what was important and what wasn't,
Yeah, it is. It's always difficult filtering that out. But I suppose you have an open mind on everything that comes in. And I suppose you have a big team as well that you can dole out these inquiries to.
Yeah.
And there were guys that were on the team itself that probably have worked for nothing that have stopped at nothing just to recover Jastine.
Yeah.
So all lines of inquiry that would come in would be very quickly followed up on. And I suppose you would prioritise what was important and what wasn't important.
Right.
We had a lot of difficulties that weekend with phone traffic. I explained before about the masts and that, and the numbers of people that were in the Dunleary area.
Yeah, there was a big Red Bull event.
Red Bull event, yeah. So that all sort of impacted on our investigation.
And as we said, like one of the members of the public identified the vehicle, phoned it in, followed it to, I think it was Cherry Orchard Industrial Estate.
Yeah.
And, subsequently the suspect, Mark Hennessy, was shot by a detective. Can you bring us back to that moment maybe when you arrived there, or you became aware of this and when you came on the scene? Yeah,
I know it was a very wet day. The roads were slippery, and I know that I got the call while I was in Bray, and I immediately set off to Shankill, and I was the first to arrive at the scene after Mark Hennessy had been shot. So, I mean, I had a lot on my hands. The ambulance people were out, and they were using a defibrillator, not a defibrillator, but a cardiac machine to try and revive Mark Hennessy. I had also to deal with my colleague who had made the call. We had to make sure that the scene was sealed off and make sure that all my authorities and everybody in authority in the guards was made aware of what was the current situation. And then I suppose we also had to give the press a statement so that the members of the public could be brought up to speed on what
I can't imagine how
a lot of angles,
much was going on.
A lot of angles to cover,
Yeah, because you're talking about a busy place. You're still dealing with a missing girl, and now you're dealing with somebody who's been shot, and then you have the whole thing about procedures have to be followed for members discharging weapons and stuff.
But I can see him lying on the ground, and I can still see him lying on the ground.
Yeah,
and thinking to myself, Jastine is. We thought she was in the car.
Yeah.
She's not in the car. All the doors in the car were open. I had a quick look into it. Not in the car. So I'm there saying, God, please work your magic on her, bring her back, because we need to find out where Jastine is.
Yeah, like I say, that was what I was going to ask you, your initial gut feeling in that.
Yeah.
I can imagine that was a bit of a knockback that she wasn't there.
Yeah.
Like logically, you're probably thinking now, this isn't going to end well.
No. No, I'm sort of, my worst fears are now coming to pass that here he is. And, I fully expected Jastine to be in the car with him, and no.
And then, you still have to carry on. You still have the job to do and deal with that disappointment.
It's like having to start again all over to see, how are we going to find her now?
But I think, wasn't it a combination of the note that Hennessy had written and left in the car, coupled with I think it was the data from the car itself?
The data from the car itself wasn't great.
No.
But we had made inquiries about where his favourite spots were and that with his own family. His own family were very cooperative.
Yeah.
So we had background information, and then we had that note in the car, and again, because it was blood soaked, I mean, we were never going to be able to decipher it. But thanks to our forensics.
Yeah, I got the note.
Yeah.
I got the note where I think it was one of the bureau team members had seen the little piece in it saying Puck's golf course, south
Yeah.
side, before it became totally unreadable.
Yeah.
And then I got it to look at it with, say, infrared stuff to try to filter out the blood, because they were afraid that if they went to wash it, that the ink might go. But thankfully, that didn't happen.
Because
So,
it was soaked.
yeah, thankfully, with what I garnered from it, and then my colleagues in fingerprints, after they washed it with whatever, they got the full stuff in it.
Yeah.
But you, as you mentioned, you'd already had information about. Well, first of all, you had that location, that Puck's golf course.
Yeah.
And information that was an area up around there that Mark Hennessy visited a lot, or considered it a favourite spot.
Yeah, but looking at it, it's from the car park of where Mark Hennessy, was, when you turn around and you look up at the Dublin Mountains, it is quite a substantial area.
Yeah.
And I remember on the Sunday night, the helicopter, the Garda helicopter was in the air, and they had the infrared heat seekers switched on, and I remember having a conversation with them in the chopper at 12 at midnight, and they were going, "Look, Frank, it's there's no point. We're picking up heat sources from deer and fox and whatever around the place. There's no heat source. One heat source we could say, have a look there."
Like you mentioned, Mark Hennessy's family, and you obviously worked closely with them. You interactions with them. You've said that they were very, very cooperative.
Very, yeah.
And you also would have had a lot of contact with Jastine's family.
Yeah.
How do you manage families in a compassionate way while these investigations, like such a high pressure
we put
investigation?
a trained family liaison officer, and they would have trained, and they would have been on other investigations as well. So they would fall back or rely on their training. So they're really the conduit for the investigation team, and there's a line of communication between myself and the family liaison officers.
Yeah.
So that's how that's managed.
Yeah. And, as people are probably aware, ultimately your worst fears were borne out in that Jastine had been killed by Hennessy, and the search team did locate her in that area. But
there's a kind of a story to it as well, in that when we looked at the scene, I was dividing it left and right, and the army were coming in to help us to carry out a search, and they are very thorough, very good, and very quick, and they have all this equipment, and they'd helped us in another search earlier on that year in Rathfarnham, where pieces of a lady's body were found.
Right. Yes.
So they came in to help us out so they went up on the left hand side, and we took up on the right hand side. And the team were assembled, and just before I could come up and brief them, one of the guards just walked out of where they all had assembled and walked over to his right, and he could see a kind of an old ESP cable, sort of where the
big spool
big
thing,
spool, the big wooden spool one.
Yeah.
And whatever way he decided that didn't look right, he went down the gorse himself. And I mean, if I'd seen him doing it, I'd have screamed to say, "Wait, we'll get climbing gear or whatever, so you won't fall down the hill there." So he went down, and he found her a good few feet down and to the right.
Yeah.
And like the search team that were there, that were assembled, were never
even got a chance.
Never got a chance. Never got off first base.
Yeah, some kind of instinct or something.
An instinct. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's obviously devastating to find her, but at the same time very important for the family and that to get her back.
Yeah.
And I think you've said before that, in your opinion, it wasn't, possibly wasn't just an out of the blue thing. That had Hennessy seen Jastine before, either earlier that day, or was it premeditated? Do you think so? Or
see, everybody asks that question, and as an investigator, I would be asking that question.
Yeah.
So when we look back and see, was he associated with any similar type, abductions or whatever, and there's no evidence there to prove that. But was he besotted by her? I mean, he would have passed that direction where she would stand and get the bus from Bray. He possibly would have seen her at the bus stop before. While I don't have any evidence in support of it, I just concluded that he must have some information on her. He must have had a look at her before. He must have maybe not quite stalked her, but definitely had come across her before.
To know she was on that bus, he had to have seen her. But for such an occurrence to happen in broad daylight where somebody snatches somebody along the side of the road.
It doesn't normally happen. It doesn't happen.
No. And that's what I think. Happen. That's why I think it hits such a chord with people is that this doesn't happen in Ireland. Like, not in broad daylight, just out of the blue.
And it caused a lot of concerns and fears for safety for people. Yeah. And again, it was something that we had to be mindful of and conscious about and issue some press release and some statements to say that this is not normal. This isn't
not normal,
run-of-the-mill.
And afterwards, like as well as that, you have obviously a responsibility to your team members themselves in are they okay? Are they okay after?
Yeah, and I suppose we mentioned, and I'm not going to mention the name, but we mentioned a particular scene earlier on before we started here. Yeah. And I remember the team, and they were all in their 20s, and the guards that went to the scene, and they came back and they were due to finish at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I corralled them all in the canteen. And look, I just explained to them that I was of a mind that the welfare officers should come in and talk to them all before they all sat in their cars and probably drove half an hour, 1 hour down the road, thinking of this horrible scene that they had come across. Yeah. Just to let them know that there was somebody there to talk to them and there was counselling available if it had affected them. Because on a couple of occasions, I have come across scenes where members have been traumatised.
Absolutely, yeah.
Really traumatised. And I suppose I am fortunate enough that I had the ability to just get on with it, and whatever. I wasn't impacted by the some of the scenes, but I am acutely aware that members are, and that is one of my responsibilities.
Yeah.
That was one of my responsibilities to ensure the well-being of the teams that I was relying on.
Yeah, and thankfully that's the way it's been, like certainly in the last good few years. But I remember myself when I started in the bureau and going out to gruesome scenes or whatever it was, and there was none of that.
No, none of
I think it was okay. Finish up. Go for a pint. Now, and that was good too.
We went and had a couple of pints and we talked about it, and we said, that's it now, back to work in the morning, and off you go.
9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, that's okay and that works.
Yeah.
But you just never know, because a good friend of mine that worked in the bureau and had been at countless scenes of, all sorts. And he described it to me that he'd go to these scenes and process what's there, you get on with the work, and took it all away into a matchbox in your head.
Yeah.
Until one day the matchbox was full. And it wasn't that, one particular scene was worse than the rest of them. It was like an accumulation of it, But he got help, thankfully, and the job was very, very supportive. And, he took a bit of time out and got back to the job. But I think it's very, very important. Like, a lot of us can deal with it. There's a switch there that you can just go into work mode and then back away from it.
Yeah.
But, I think while you're in the job and you're surrounded by colleagues that, everybody has each other's back for the most part.
Yeah.
But say when you retire, have you found ways to switch off, or I don't really mean to say compartmentalize or anything like that. Have you noticed in yourself, since you're not in the job anymore, that sometimes maybe you think about things that you've been involved in or seen or whatever, and they might affect you differently now? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't actually have any flashbacks at that. I remember I retired on maybe a Thursday, and the things that I was worried about and stressed about on the Friday didn't matter. And I retired, and I was retired for about 4 months, and I did various activities and fulfilled various things on my bucket list. And I got to a stage where I said, I really can't. I can't stay around doing nothing all day long, and it's not to quiet my mind or whatever, but it's just I like something to do. I like being focused. I like being busy, and I got an opportunity to go back to the workplace with a private security firm. Yeah, and I said I'd have a look at it, I'd take it up and review it in 6 months, and maybe 3.5 years later, I'm still at it.
Great, yeah, because I can't imagine, like, coming from what you were doing, especially in the latter part of your career, that you were involved in all these investigations, had the responsibility over loads and loads and loads of people, that you can't just switch off and go, right, I'm going to play golf. It's not in you.
And you can only play golf once or twice a week, and whatever else you're doing. But the other thing was the capacity to keep learning. And, I have been through the sales and marketing course with Smurfit College since I retired with the company that I'm working with now. And like every day is a school day, you learn something new. And I certainly can bring a lot of what I learned in the Guards to the my private industry job, my private sector job. But equally, I can learn a lot from them as well.
Yeah, like it's so important that that you've spent so long doing a particular job. Okay, you're 40 years in the Guards, to be able to bring a lot of what you learnt forward, rather than just putting a bookend on it and putting it away.
Yeah.
And
so I suppose I'm answering your question in that I don't have time to, really.
Yeah, that's
I just keep myself busy. Yeah, I actually never wanted to retire. And it just came up all of a sudden, and 40 years just in a blink of an eye, really
flashed by.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about Jastine. Are there any other cases during your career that have stayed with you? Yeah,
there's a lot of investigations that I've been on down through the years, and with a lot of success. And I've been very fortunate in the teams that I work with. And I suppose I always had the view that I bring people on with me all the time. And that was good. And it was nice to see people coming on and they're going up to the ranks as well and becoming very good investigators themselves. And there's a lot of cases that I don't think about, because I established very good relationships with their family, with the brothers, the sisters, the mothers, the fathers, and all the rest. So out of loyalty to those people, I don't talk about those investigations and those cases, because I certainly don't want to bring up memories or bad memories or horrible times for those people.
Yeah.
I suppose with Jastine, there's such a public interest in it.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. The family are going to be reminded of it in other forms besides this as well every day, because it was so horrific.
Yeah, but as you said, the public, in going back to say that they were so eager to help, but there was such an outpouring of sympathy for her family when she was found.
Yeah. The public machine, though, is fantastic. I remember down in the south part of Wicklow where a shopkeeper was stabbed to death, and early in the morning, freezing cold, and one of my colleagues came up to me and said, "Jesus, boss, where are we going to go with this one?" And I said, and I don't know why, I just said straight away, I said, actually, give this one to the community guards, and talk to the community and that, and the community will give them up.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So, the public are always on side. The public are always willing to help.
Obviously, being a senior investigating officer in charge of big teams of gardaí, and that means using methodical procedures, whatever, but also how important do you think your gut is, your instinct?
Yeah.
Is that important as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. And I suppose I referred to those two runners in a back garden where Charles Sinnapane had been shot in Bray at an apartment block, and the guys that were fleeing the scene had thrown the runners over a railing. And I remember the call came in, and I remember thinking, 2 runners thrown over a railing.
Yeah.
What's the significance in that? And our scenes of crime officer went down and collected them, and from there we now had DNA and that as well. Yeah. So it was just a gut thing. And I remember and the reason it sticks in my mind is that I remember one of my colleagues asking me, "Why did you send them down in the middle of an investigation to collect those 2 runners?" And I'm going, I had a gut instinct about it. And I suppose you do get gut instincts, but the other thing about it is you really do have to keep an open mind. You really, really do have to have a blank canvas.
Yeah, but you don't know what will turn out to be important. Well, anyway, Frank, thank you very much for coming in. It's fascinating talking to you, and I'm sure we could just chat away about stuff continuously, But thank you again for coming into us. And thank you for listening to this episode of Lines of Enquiry. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and review, sharing it to your story on social media, leaving a comment below, or simply telling a friend you enjoyed it. Your support helps us make more episodes. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email linesofenquiry@goloudnow.com. Lines of Enquiry is presented by me, John Sweetman. The podcast is created by Darren Cleary. Our executive producer is Owen Brennan. Aoife Plunkett is our producer. Remember, in the end, everything done in the dark comes to light.